Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
Guest is Peter Downing, founder of Wexit Canada. You can find their website at wexitcanada.com. Peter, welcome back to the Goddard Report.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jim.
Wexit Canada, are you working on a merger?
No, Wexit Canada's federal party, so we're not looking to merge with any other federal groups. At the Alberta level, Wexit Alberta is, I think now today is the 11th today? Wexit Canada is only a few weeks away from a merger ratification with a smaller, now sovereigntist party called the Freedom Conservative Party. So we're expecting... we have an agreement in principle that both boards signed off on a few months ago now. And, so as of June 29th, the ratification vote is that day. And we're hoping for a positive result for the birth of the official birth of the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta.
So that's just Alberta. That wouldn't include the other western provinces.
No, Wexit BC is the Independence Party in British Columbia, and they're fully autonomous, fully independent. They represent the interests of British Columbia, and they were registered. The rules in British Columbia is you don't have to go through. I think you don't have to collect any signatures to be registered as a political party there. So they were able to get registered a little bit quicker, and I don't think they're discussing mergers with any other political parties at this time. Mm-hmm. But their leadership would have to speak for themselves.
So this would be the Wild Rose Independence Party.
Yeah, and it's nice because it allows for, a name like that or an identity like that. The Wild Rose Party obviously was very popular in Alberta, and was founded on pretty much near identical principles. And yeah, we've just added the word independence to it, and again, carving out that principled, conservative libertarian, position. We chose that name because it, evokes the, kind of what got us, I think, for a lot of us, what got us into politics in the first place, too. I started with I started, in politics as a volunteer 5 years ago, in the general election, in 2015, just as a volunteer for a local Wild Rose candidate, and, so that's where a lot of us got our start.
Do you want to be the leader of the Wild Rose Independence Party?
No, not at all. I want to continue in my role as the leader of Wexit Canada, and be the voice at the federal level for Western Canada and advance Western Canadian nationalism based on conservative and libertarian principles. But no, the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta, I expect will soon be appointing, again, if the ratification goes through as expected, they will appoint, I expect they will appoint an interim leader and then proceed towards permanent leadership race in first an initial or a founding AGM.
Would it make sense for the Wild Rose Independence Party, when it's formed, to explore merging with the People's Party of Canada in the hope of saving Canada?
Well, that kind of crosses a couple of different lines, because again, the Wild Rose Independence Party would be a provincial political party in the province of Alberta, whereas the People's Party of Canada is a federal party that's seeking to be elected to be the government of Canada in all 10 provinces and 3 territories. So strategically, I don't think it makes sense. We definitely do share a lot of principles with the People's Party of Canada, but the strategy of running candidates, attempting to win a place like, Ontario, Quebec, or the Maritimes, I think is extremely difficult with the record levels of immigration, the tendency of the two establishment parties to bribe special interest groups with their tax money, especially in those the heaviest populated cities in Toronto and Montreal. I don't think it's a tenable strategy. We do have a concentration of people who do share our values in Western Canada, Alberta and Saskatchewan in particular. And the idea that we can save Canada, I really think that Conservatives need to get it out of their heads that we can save Canada. We cannot save Canada. We can choose to leave or to stay, to accept the current situation, or we can choose to leave. We don't have any other legal, constitutional, parliamentary, or Senate options to save Canada. We don't have the ability to either impose our will on Eastern Canada within this confederation, or we're not dealing with people who either share the same values or willing to negotiate on a good faith basis. If Eastern Canada, and I say that broadly, it's not one monolithic entity, but if the power structures within Eastern Canada, within Confederation, decide that they want to open up the Constitution and eliminate the systemic injustices and imbalances which keeps Western Canada disaffected economically, culturally, and in terms of exercising our political rights, then we can have that discussion at that time. But the ball is totally and 100% in their court to do that. We have the decision whether we're going to stay or to leave.
Do you think the Wild Rose Independence Party would run candidates in BC, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, or is it just purely Alberta?
So again, just to clarify, the Wild Rose Independence Party it will be a provincial party that'll only be running candidates at the provincial level in Alberta, just like Wexit, Saskatchewan, who were also considering a name change to the Buffalo Party of Saskatchewan, would only be running candidates locally in Saskatchewan at the provincial level to contest provincial government. Wexit Canada, again, will only run candidates in all four Western provinces. But this election, I think in terms of concentration of our efforts to win seats in Parliament, we are only going to be running candidates this time. If Trudeau calls a snap election, we will only be running candidates in Alberta and Saskatchewan. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave out British Columbia and Manitoba at this time. And I think in terms of a goodwill exercise with the public, that because British Columbia and Manitoba are a little bit more contested and have a little bit more, they're a little bit more diverse in terms of the political spectrum. We actually don't want to split the vote in those two provinces. We know that's a concern of Conservatives, and really we have to act on what our base is telling us. And at the same time, if the Conservative Party of Canada had any principles, which obviously we know that they don't, they would stay out of Alberta and Saskatchewan if they want to really claim that, hey, don't split the vote. Well, the reality is, last year there was a poll taken by Angus Reid that showed that there'd be 35% support for a Western Canadian regional federal party and 29% support for the Conservatives. So they should just stay out of our territory.
We'll have more with Peter Downing in a moment.
Aven Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Aven's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avenresources.com.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Peter Downing. Peter, what would be needed to be done for Western Canada to join the U.S.?
There would be a number of things I mean, in terms of if you look at industry, there would definitely need to be a consensus amongst our energy producers, our agricultural producers, and I would say military personnel. That's a viable, or that's the best option, or a desirable option. Definitely, the discussion or the sentiment about joining the United States is it's a real sentiment. It's a minority position within the Wexit movement. I would say probably somewhere around, maybe just a little bit over 10% would say that joining the U.S. is the best option. The ideal, and I think where the 85 to 90% of people are at right now is they still want to have a Western Canadian nation, and I think that's a good thing, and that's certainly what I advocate. We do have a higher concentration of like-minded people in Western Canada. 3 million more people in the United States voted Democrat in the 2016 election. So, there are definitely challenges. America's mounting debt, probably, the greater level of social instability that they have at this time. But I think what it's really going to boil down to at the end of the day, is number one, industry acceptance of it. But number two is, if Trudeau goes so far as to, people are really concerned about some of the things he's advocating. We've seen the shutdown and control of our economy, the elimination of small businesses off the map, illegal gun grabs, unconstitutional gun grabs, talking about mandatory vaccinations, and it's definitely authoritarian, and we can feel the slide towards totalitarianism. And I think in that case, it would come down to a choice and also depending on the political situation in the United States is, which one of the three options is best for us to accept the political situation in Canada, to fight for our own nationhood, or to join the United States. So that'll be a decision at that time. And I think the biggest fear of the government in Ottawa has to be that Western Canada, Alberta, and Saskatchewan in particular would secede and join the 51st and the 52nd states. So all I can say is if they continue to go down, and I really believe the dangerous road they're going down, I think that their worst fears may start to come to pass.
Do you think the COVID-19 lockdowns are about a virus or the planned destruction of Canada?
I would say, I think it's funny because we're at a point right now where the majority of people do not trust what comes out of the mouth of our government officials, our public officials, the mainstream media, or the quote-unquote experts. I've had personal conversations with two sitting MLAs in the government party in Alberta who said that COVID-19, their response to shutdown was based on flawed data. So I said, okay, great. Why don't you just admit it publicly? And they won't. So we have to read between the lines, and I think that coming into 2020, there was a major, there certainly was an unprecedented amount of global corporate debt due to I think the artificial low interest rates for such a period of time that businesses and the G8 economies in particular took on a lot of debt. And what we've seen is the shutdown of our economy, and I believe the planned shutdown of our economy. And if you can read articles on Bloomberg, on CNN, on Business Today, on mainstream financial articles that have said this stuff going into 2020, and basically said we haven't killed the economy, we've put it on life support. And so we're seeing the industry bailouts on an unprecedented scale. That's the only thing about this unprecedented time. People have been fighting for power and been tricking other human beings for a very, very long time. So this isn't unprecedented. But the corporate bailouts are unprecedented. And we're seeing these industries receive huge amounts of government subsidies to pay down their debts. But at the same time, they're not hiring more people. They're actually firing more people. We've seen it in Alberta with the energy sector, the tax cuts given to oil sector industries, who, yes, they did take a beating under the Notley government, but they used public money to pay down their debts. And I believe it's crony capitalism at its worst. We're not getting the truth. We're being threatened with jail time, fines in hundreds of thousands of dollars, but at the same time, now you got left-wing protesters out in mass force. So we know that the COVID-19 is, Jim, I haven't personally changed my life one bit since this has happened. I've still gone to work every single day, interacted. I don't wear a face mask. And me and my family are 100% healthy. This is nonsense. And, just even the push towards the vaccination, which look at it through capital lenses. Don't look at it through necessarily a conspiracy lens. There's no conspiracy about it. You've got people who have the leverage to move markets and move politicians according to the will, doing what they've always done to make money. And that's what you're seeing with COVID-19.
Do you think Trudeau's plan is to spend so much money that Canada ends up bankrupt?
I'm not Justin Trudeau. I can't read his mind. I am very concerned with his globalist ambitions, even going, when he was elected wearing, global citizen t-shirts and saying that Canada is the first postmodern nation, and this big push for a Security Council seat where, putting Canada, let's think about this for a second. Putting Canada on the Security Council is putting like Saudi Arabia on the human rights, as the head of the human rights. Canada can't defend itself. So putting Canada on the Security Council is, it's laughable.
Canada can't even put decent ejection seats in the snowbirds.
That are 50 plus 60s. How old are the snowbirds?
Those planes were built in the early 60s.
Right. So,
but the problem is that they're ejection seats, and this was found in a report on a fatal accident before. You're sitting on top of a 37 millimeter anti-tank shell. That's what blows you out. That's stage 2 ejection seat technology. Modern ejection seats are basically flying machines on their own. They take you out of the airplane gently. They take you away from the fireball. They make sure your parachute opens and that the seat separates. Yep. And that poor captain who died in there, the nurse who tried to save her life said that she was still strapped to her ejection seat. So the seat did not work. But I'm just saying we have a government that can't even put decent ejection seats in these obsolete airplanes that our aerial heroes fly in.
And God rest the soul of Captain Casey. That tour itself was meant as a morale boost for COVID-19. So, I guess, COVID-19 has killed a few people, I guess, but not the way that they say it has. Whether it be, look at a one very, very high profile public incident like that, or the number of suicides, or even seniors, dying, in the dark away from the love and the care of their family members and the people who they should be seeing the last days. Family members unable to take part in funerals because of this COVID-19 nonsense. But yeah, again, Theresa Tam saying go out and go to the mass protests. So we know this is political. This is political. It is not. This is not scientific. This is utter and sheer nonsense. These people should be fired and jailed who are making these decisions on behalf of the public.
How would you characterize the outlook for the Canadian economy going forward?
I think that within the financial centers in Eastern Canada, in Toronto for sure, I think they're always going to have a role to play in capital markets. They're always going to have a role to play. I mean, the financial sector itself. I think, the banks always get their money, I guess. I think that if we accept the status quo, the financial sector will stay strong. Not that it particularly benefits regular working class folk. In terms of our energy sector, you can estimate it. I'm not sure, somewhere around 15%. I think it's 15% of the sector in Alberta. It might be more or less in different places. Energy outlook, I think that again the demand is there certainly for whether it's hydrocarbons, everything that's being biofuel, this whole green clean energy, it's timber. Anybody who's watched Planet of the Humans, I mean, everything that they're talking about there with the environmental movement for clean energy, it's clear cutting, it's forestry, it's logging. Whether it's using wood for manufactured items, for buildings, or for energy, that's always going to be there. So our natural resources are always going to be in demand. The question is how much of the profit and the wealth of the proceeds of those resources is staying in Canada. I think that's the real question. Manufacturing in Ontario, in Eastern Canada, and in Quebec, where they always have the votes, will continue to be the beneficiary of public tax dollars. The governments there won't let them fail. We haven't had, we have the opportunity, and this is what I would say, is that we have the opportunity to keep wealth here and create a cyclical effect through tax reform, through obviously separating from Ottawa, not sending them tens of billions of dollars a year, through the elimination of income tax. Alberta alone, we have $20 trillion of net marketable natural resources. We have 4.3 million people. Every Albertan is worth $4.65 million if we look at it that way. I'm the head of a household of 6, so you do the math. My family is worth over $25 million. And it's going to be more or less depending on each province. But this idea that we allow other companies to come in, give us an absolute pittance for our resources, allow our politicians telling us our energy is dirty and selling it for pennies on the dollars to China, so that China can become number one in the world over the United States. Through repetitive public messaging, people are beginning to see the light on some of these things. And it's not that our economy is not strong. It is. We have all the wealth here, and it's not going to be safely locked in the ground. It's going to be sent somewhere else for pennies on the dollar. The question is how much of that wealth stays here? And secondly, if we're able to break these changes, and keep our wealth, how much more capital, and industrial capital, not speculative capital, but industrial capital, will that bring to Western Canada? I mean, we've got the ability to literally never collect income tax again, and to pay off the household debt of every single man, woman, and child in Western Canada. We have the wealth. It would be a drop in the bucket to do these things. But this idea, conservatism, conservative political strategies, libertarian political strategies on their own are failing. They need to be wrapped up within the vehicle of Western nationalism and very clearly defined values, rule of law, free market economy, without allowing for the predatory investment, predatory speculative investment, to grab a stranglehold on our resources, because they are ours. We own these resources. It belongs to us.
We'll have more with Peter Downing right after this.
Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Peter Downing. Peter, how much influence do George Soros and the United Nations have over Canada?
When it comes to George Soros, again, I don't know the man personally, despite what some people had to smear me with. Never met the man, never taken a dime from him. I don't think I'm the kind of political, person that he would want working for him, because we definitely have two different visions. But he definitely does seem to have a lot of influence within the Canadian government. For instance, Chrystia Freeland, who is Deputy Prime Minister and kind of has been assigned all portfolios, was scheduled to be his biographer. She obviously, as many people know, she was a journalist, and I believe an editor at some point, or higher up with the Globe and Mail in Toronto. And so she's written that Plutocracy book, which I think, George Soros for somebody like George Soros to try to advocate against free markets is insane. This guy has made his money off of the openness of the financial systems. Or of the market systems, but he definitely is somebody who, if you read his books, which I have, to understand this idea of centralization of control. He talks about the inefficiencies of standard or modern economic theory, which I have sympathy for. He does point out some truth, but at the same time, this idea that decisions need to be taken away from local people and local populations. Again, this is why you're seeing a rise of populism all over the world and nationalism all over the world, is because people eventually don't like having their stuff and their decisions and their freedom taken from them. So he definitely seems to have influence over Miss Friedland. I think he had some influence, or there were public meetings between him and Mr. Trudeau in Davos, Switzerland, just after Mr. Trudeau got elected back in 2015. So, George Soros gets held up as this left-wing boogeyman. I think that he's a very wealthy man. He came to a lot of wealth by betting against the British pound through the foreign exchange markets. He made his wealth legally. But the influence he's had to move political decision making, and he even says it himself, the same way he made his money is the same way as a social experiment, is the same thing he's doing to us politically. So, I would, not against the man personally, but I would probably outlaw him stepping foot within the Western Canadian nation, because of his influence that is harmful.
Are the powers that be taking away the freedoms of Canadians?
100%. That is just so obvious, whether it's through this COVID-19 social distancing restrictions, but allowing left-wing protesters and race baiters and communists to run rampant. Again, ever-increasing taxation, and I mean even the COVID-19 bailouts. What they've done fiscally is through the government printing more money and more money being handed out to the winners that they've chosen. Those, the government definitely has been picking winners and losers based on who's their friend. And the money that's given out initially isn't being spent within in an inflationary market like we can expect in the future. Obviously, more money supply in more money within the money supply. It leads to inflation. We're going to experience inflation in the future. So those of us who didn't receive that money in the first place are going to have to spend more for the goods that we could have bought right now. So that's another form of wealth distribution, is through these handouts and through inflationary monetary policy. I think inflationary monetary policy is one of the most destructive ways that you can take decisions away from regular people, devaluing their unit of work. That hour or that week or whatever, that hourly wage or that salary or that commission or that bonus is worth less now because of what our federal government is doing.
Is the deep state trying to provoke civil wars within Canada, and what can we do about it?
I think that, so we say deep state, and I would say, I'll define my terms a little bit. I think it would be that element within the American government and civil structure or bureaucracy or public service whose loyalty is not to the people of America, that I think they have a longing towards the aristocracy, the days of the aristocracy and unlimited power of the kings and queens of Europe, Western Europe in particular. If you just look at the media, you can look at the glowing positive attention that they give to the royal family of England, who, by the way, aren't British. They're Germanic. Not that I have a problem against German people. But the glowing review of a queen whose two eldest sons, Andrew and Charles, or friends of two of the most notorious human traffickers and pedophiles in Western history, being Jeffrey Epstein and and Jimmy Savile. And, for all this James Bond nonsense in MI6, either it's the worst intelligence service in the history of Western civilization, or the Queen knew what her sons, who her sons were with and what they're up to. So, when I define deep state, I don't think that the British just have gone away. The royal family just, went back to eat tea and crumpets forever after the loss of the American War. I think the American Revolutionary War, I think that America is, certain elements have tried to undermine America ever since, whether it be through encroachment in the Western Hemisphere, hence the need for the Monroe Doctrine, or whether it be, the cultural invasion, the counterculture of the 1960s through groups like the Tavistock Society, and sending over untalented hacks like the Beatles to demoralize and degenerate Western culture through the sexual revolution of the 60s and the drug culture of the 60s and 70s. So getting specifically to the Civil War question, yes, 100%. We put out a billboard about that last year, asking is Trudeau leading us to civil war? And we got a lot of backlash in Edmonton. But just like I keep telling people, is if you don't agree with me right now, just wait a year. And look at where we're at right now. We've got the weaponized media, and the mainstream media is truly the enemy of the people, 100%. Starting, they're the ones who put out the public call for it, and the politicians follow it because, well, let's be honest, our politicians are idiots. They were the popular kid in school. They weren't the tough kid. They weren't the smart kid. They were the popular kid, and they'll do whatever they can to keep their popularity. And 100% now, as even said, we're going to have a class structure based on immunity and who takes the COVID-19 vaccine. No, free people are going to put their foot down at some point. And I do believe that we have a critical mass of that in Western Canada. So part of what we can do about these things is making a big thing of how we can avoid bloodshed. I'm a former military man and policeman, and nobody wants to see bloodshed. Nobody wants that. And at the same time, we're not letting, whether it be the United Nations, which have the World Health Organization's outright said, we'll come into people's home and take their kids. They have said that, and the next day after Trump began the process of defunding. So I think there's a few things involved in this. I think that we should hope for a Trump re-election, and we should speak positively of the Trump administration whenever and wherever we can publicly to combat this narrative that he's isolated himself, alienated himself from all his allies, for the swing voters in the United States. I think that those swing voters in the United States need to know that Mr. Trump is admired, and we've admired the accomplishments of his administration, both for what he's done for the American people and turning their economy around and bringing back the rule of law, and just a sense of pride, just a sense of personal pride and honor to the American people, contrasted against sick of, what the Obama administration did, or the warmongering of the Bush administration. Donald Trump hasn't had to drop too many bombs, literally. He's been one of the most peaceful presidents. And I think ending that cycle of never-ending Middle Eastern wars. So, the American people need to know that, for one. Number two, Western Canadians need to know their strength. And the concept of Western nationalism isn't going to happen overnight. But the more that people speak freely, I said the best way to get free speech is simply speak freely. The only psychological difference between a lot of Western Canadians and our American friends and neighbors in the Midwest is we avoid conflict. We have to be willing to embrace conflict. Conflict's coming. They're bringing it to us. The left won't stop. This Saturday they're going to small town Alberta, where there's maybe 35 black residents to protest the death of George Floyd, ignoring 100% whether it be the black cops who were killed or whether it be the fact that we have apartheid law in Canada. The Indian Act is apartheid law, race-based apartheid law. Our response is we're going to go down there and have a ball hockey game, a road hockey game in Innisfail, and raise money for murdered for police officers. Actually, specifically American police officers who've been killed in the line of duty. I think that's how we can show our support to law enforcement generally and to our friends in America specifically. Do not comply. The left likes to talk about civil disobedience. Even in the recently released Millie Weaver video, the political left said it 1038 to 1048 of that video. Burning down buildings is a legitimate and powerful expression of resistance. Well, if that's the case, opposing firearms prohibitions and gun grabs and confiscations with every fiber of our being is just so important. Chairman Mao said it best. Political power comes out of the barrel of a gun. It really does. And so to protect and defend our freedoms, having these conversations openly is very, very important, because the power structures, whether it be the pillars of our society, truly are our energy producers, our food producers, and our soldiers. So bringing those people in those industries on side, whenever the political left attacks our food supply or our ranchers or our meat producers or our energy workers or our soldiers or our cops, is taking a stand for those people 100% and letting them know that they have a political home within Western nationalism. For all the police chiefs out there, you've got the political left who are they're defunding your budget. Work with Western nationalists. We will give you a bigger budget. So those types of things, I think, are very, very important. I think, and naming and shaming the political left the same way they do to us, whether it be an individual reporter, whether it be an individual activist, is literally, I've read Rules for Radicals as well. I mean, you can do those things to the political left as well, and the information is all there. But it was Sun Tzu, the famous Chinese general who wrote the famous Art of War. He said that the number one factor in the success or failure of any military campaign, and I think you can apply it to any political campaign or social movement, is simply this, is the righteousness and the legitimacy of the cause. And this is where we have the greatest advantage over our leftist opponents, is they're morally degenerate, morally bankrupt. People might not like what I've said, but if you look at left-wing protesters in general, it really looks like a bunch of sluts and creeps who don't have anything better to do. And so we have to point out these things so that regular people can stop being afraid. It's almost like in Lord of the Rings Part 2, you got that worm-tongued guy, poisoning the mind of the king. And it was only when Gandalf smacks him around a little bit and he gets out of his ear, the king starts to realize his own strength and tosses the little guy out on his butt. So we have to do the same.
Peter, is there a defund the police movement in Canada?
Yes.
What do you think their goal is?
To create social instability, and through that instability, further their communist agenda.
Do you think the riots are being organized and funded, and are they coming to Western Canada?
Yes.
Who do you think's behind it?
I believe people like George Soros, the Tides Foundation. So I think that's more the environmental side. So I think it's the Open Doors Society. I would expect that we would find some more than a trace of that type of funding behind this. Black Lives Matters in general is funded by George Soros. We know this.
Is Premier Jason Kenney doing a good job for Alberta?
No, he's doing a very bad job.
What could he do better?
He can start adopting and doing the things that we're saying within the Western separatist movement. He needs to be Alberta first, because we're short on time. He needs to be Alberta first, but this man is trying to be the Prime Minister of Canada, so he will always appease Ontario and Quebec.
In Alberta, some land rights belong to First Nations, China, and other foreign entities. How much land belongs to Alberta, and is that an issue for separation?
100% of the land belongs to Alberta and Albertans. The private property of First Nations people belong to First Nations people. That includes the surface and subsurface lands rights. But just in the same way, title for surface and subsurface rights should, and I think by natural law, belongs to all Albertans, and is not an issue stopping separation.
What's happening at the provincial level for Alberta to separate?
People need to lose confidence in the United Conservative Party of Alberta and vote for the Wildrose Independence Party of Alberta. And I think that will just naturally happen over time.
How would a separated Alberta or Western Canada deal with debt, taxes, and jobs?
Well, the Queen of England is supposedly the richest woman or person in the world, or one of them. So she's more than capable to pay off the debt of Ottawa. we've never had any proper representation. So, none of that, that debt doesn't belong to us. B, we put over $622 billion into Confederation since the Equalization Program of 1957. So we will be seeking compensation from Ottawa. In terms of jobs, again, the ability to, we have a steady customer to the south in the United States. I think that we need to be taking a much larger share of hydrocarbon-based revenue, because we own the oil. This pittance of a royalty program needs to stop. And again, we're not crony capitalists, so we will do what's in the best interest of Western Canadians by eliminating income tax and the repayment of, the forgiveness of all debt, or the paying off of all debt, I should say, frees people for the first time in a generation to be able to spend more money locally, which will attract multinational corporations that are all over the world, because their CEOs as well will want to not have to. They will also want to not pay income tax on their salaries.
Under the Constitution, do provinces have control over a number of things that are ignored, including immigration? And I'm thinking of the example of Quebec, where they have control over immigration. None of the other provinces do.
Yes. Shorter answer is yes. And the English Bill of Rights, which is also part of our Constitution, grants old stock Canadians the birthright to bear to be armed for the purposes of self-defense, and the kings and queens haven't upheld that law ever since. So there are a lot of things, including the English Bill of Rights, which says who can and can't be in government, and actually would form the basis of lawfully removing the Liberal Party of Canada from government, every single one of their MPs.
What are you hearing on Nessera Jessera, and can you explain what those are?
I've heard it's kind of like the biblical concept. Again, I've only heard. I haven't put a lot of attention into it, just because it sounds funny. I believe it's the concept, or I'm aware that it's the concept of debt forgiveness based on the Jubilee laws that Moses gave to the children of Israel, recorded in the Christian Old Testament. Again, I look at it from the perspective of, we have the resources to, again, it's public money and our public resources. The public can decide if they want to use the sale of their own resources to pay off their debt. So it doesn't necessarily take a Jubilee perspective, but at the same time, one thing that I think needs to be very much controlled in the future is what we allow companies, especially foreign companies, to charge our residents in terms of interest, or recurring interest, or cyclical interest. That's a huge trap and a poison that we need to break free from.
A Conservative motion to stop China from buying struggling firms passed. It was supported by the Conservatives, NDP, and Bloc, with only Liberal MPs of the committee voting against it. Could this issue bring down the minority government?
I don't think so, unless it was. Typically, budget becomes the big confidence issue that governments are brought down on. I think that there's two situations where we're going to see either a snap election, whether it be the Liberal government's trying to push through something very radical that they want to feel that they have a mandate for, or they want to take advantage of the positive public opinion they have in Eastern Canada because of COVID interventionism, I guess, or COVID handouts, before people start to realize the economic wreckage and blame the Liberals. So I can see it'll just be the political calculation, I imagine, will be based on how the Liberal government and their advisors assess those two factors or scenarios.
How much of Canada does China own, and is Canada being taken over by China?
Well, I don't know the total number. I know it was actually Stephen Harper who opened the door for China entryism, and the reality is the Western Canadian nation will I guess have to, under the name of national security, would have to maybe take back some of that ownership to protect our own interests in the best way. We don't have loyalty to China or to any other country. We have loyalty to our friends and neighbors.
We hear rumblings that foreign countries like to buy Canadian politicians. Strategically, would it make sense for them to buy politicians at all levels of government, and what could a foreign country get out of this?
Well, a country like China, so the short answer is yes. I think that the Canadian politicians are some of the biggest political prostitutes in current existence. But, China in particular, whether it be through intellectual property theft through our universities, whether it be through having a window and an eye into the United States, and influencing, because Canada is still the largest trading partner of the U.S., influencing the American supply chain, which will influence American politicians. And you see this, countries like Australia. One of the best books, I think, to read up on this topic is a recent one. I can't remember the name of the author. He's actually a liberal fellow, but it's called In the Claws of the Panda. In the Claws of the Panda. Not a super long read, but I think it's a very good primer on some of these topics when it comes to Chinese interventionism in Canada.
How could Chapter 27 of the USMCA agreement, which goes into effect July 1st, be enforced in Canada, and what is Chapter 27?
Well, I believe Chapter 27 is the anti-corruption laws. And so for a state like Canada, and I love that they're doing it on July 1st, that should kick Trudeau right in his teeth over the Omar Khadr deal. I believe there was either a payout or something that was done on the anniversary of Christopher Spears of the murder, or something to do with Christopher Spears. Oh no, it was on Independence Day. That's right, it was on Independence Day. They did something like that on July 4th. The government of Canada has for some time now picked dates. I mean, the most recent one in Edmonton would be the defunding the police on the anniversary of Constable Daniel Woodall's murder. So for the Americans to do that right back to the government in Ottawa, I love it. It's brilliant, and I believe would be the basis for potential law enforcement or some sort of action, or maybe even regime change with a government who's actively promoting a nation that's actively, or a government, I should say, actively promoting groups like Antifa, or allowing safe space for Antifa. So, and will it be like toppling the Taliban for harboring Al-Qaeda? I don't know, but I think it would be along the same. It would just be a matter of degree, not a matter of difference or type.
Could the Nova Scotia shootings been a false flag to usher in gun control?
I think that so that false flag theory has gone around a lot. I really would like to know how the fella, there's some picture of the police car, all decked out and all that kind of stuff. Some people say they ordered the stuff online. I'm skeptical of that. The biggest red flag in that whole scenario is the bulldozing of the house. I mean, for a crime scene to be a crime of the magnitude, and I've seen the same videos pointing out, this happened this time and whatnot, and there's a lot of concerns that a lot of people have, but the bulldozing of the house, this is an investigation that should be taking years in terms of who helped this guy plan, whatnot. So to bulldoze the house, I think, within a month? And, like the main crime scene within a month, and then to usher in quote unquote gun control, or, the banning of, military style what they call military style rifles, murder rifles. I call them police style rifles that are actually used as a life-saving tool, because they don't have automatic function. That's the biggest red flag to me. And the other fact is that none of the firearms used in the commission of the offense were lawfully obtained. So, those two things, the rush to, justify and plus it was an order in council, which is legal as well. You can't ban firearms that way. So even legally according to their law, to Canadian law. So those three things combined together definitely have an agenda that lead that way, but the bulldozing of the house, I mean, that is insane. I'm a former Mountie. That you just don't do that.
What has gun confiscation led to throughout history?
Well, that's an easy question. Mass murder by governments against the citizens, whether it be the Nazi regime of Hitler in the 30s, whether it be Stalin's regime in Russia, in Soviet Russia, or Pol Pot in Cambodia, and the list goes on. I mean, whether it be in big totals, the 30 million people who died at the hands of the Nazis, the over 100 million who died at the hands of the communists in the 20th century. So no, People aren't giving up their guns.
The Prime Minister took a knee at a Black Lives Matter protest last week. Your thoughts on that?
Blackface? Prime Minister blackface? I mean, come on. That's just the height of hypocrisy. But the media gives the Liberals a pass because they're all singing from the same songbook. And if you've got the Liberal government funding the, communist reporters, Marxist reporters, they're always going to give it a pass and then hyper focus on, purported conservative malfeasance. So it's Justin Trudeau. He said it himself. He's got a long history of communism in his family, and that he admires dictatorships like China, and I think that they're doing what they can to advance that.
Your thoughts on law and order in Canada today?
We definitely have a two-tiered justice and enforcement system. Whether it be what we're seeing the difference between families out with their kids getting slapped with major COVID-19 fines versus protesters being encouraged to gather in the tens of thousands. Whether it be our family law system, the bias against dads and fathers that we see, not to take anything away from women, because there's a lot of moms and sisters and daughters and new spouses out there that suffer with the abuse that goes on in the family court system. Whether it be assault rifles for First Nations and not for white people, that First Nations people can't sell their tobacco to non-First Nations people. The Indian Act itself, you name it. Canada is, there is no rule of law in Canada. It's just based on what liberal appointed judges decide that they want to do at a given time.
Are there solutions that will lead Canada or Western Canada to being a great and prosperous country?
Definitely the separation of Western Canada from Ottawa, for sure. People question the border issues. Countries didn't form overnight, but just like leaving a bad relationship, sometimes you got to sleep in a one-bedroom apartment for a little while, but then you build yourself up so much more freer and better than you ever were before. But just having that dignity of not being in an abusive, cheating relationship, I think, is number one. So that sense of national pride, of national identity, free market, rule of law, Judeo-Christian culture, that's the number one thing that we need to do, and then use our common sense, which is typically based on conservative and libertarian principles, to put the political structures in place that we need to, and to form the trade alliances that we need to. The only way that's going to keep Canada together is for Eastern Canada to be pressured into a situation where they have to open up and fix the Constitution. Or even just start applying, the constitutional documents like the English Bill of Rights in its entirety.
Where can people find out more information on the Wild Rose Independence Party and Wexit Canada? To follow our Facebook pages on Wexit Canada. I don't think there's a Wild Rose Independence Party one just yet, because the two parties still have to ratify the merger. So you can look at what's going on. Freedom Conservative Party. Just use internet search engine Freedom Conservative Party. Wexit Alberta. So wexitalberta.com is our website. Wexitcanada.com is our federal website. That's going under a big facelift. So it'll be updated soon. And then you can even just follow my Facebook page at Peter Downing political Facebook page, or on Twitter Peter Downing AB, to kind of keep into the loop of what's going on. And I think the next biggest jump for us, is going to be the conservative leadership race. Right now, we're carving out some, firm statements and fit and feel and policy that's going to be very, very attractive to people who are going to be off-put by somebody like Peter MacKay or Aaron O'Toole getting elected. It is going to be Wexit. It will be a friendly place for social conservatives, that's for sure. Peter, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thank you. I always enjoy it.
My guest has been Peter Downing, founder of Wexit Canada, online at wexitcanada.com. He was speaking to us from Edmonton. If you have any questions for Peter or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.